Hi everyone, I'm happy you could make it. I'm going to tell you a strange story today, so hold on, it gets heated. I'm Mike Walker, and I had been married to Lisa for more than 23 years when this all started. Together we have 3 children, a daughter who was entering her first year at Stanford and 2 boys who were in their early 20s. Although our life appeared ideal on the outside, it was anything but. I became aware that I had gained a few extra pounds around 12 years ago. Nothing too drastic, but I made the decision to adjust a few things. I reduced my sugar intake, began working out often, and was able to get back into the same physical condition as when I played college football. I had a desk job, but my weight hadn't altered much in over a decade. Now you would think that my wife would be pleased with my recovery, wouldn't you? Not quite, though. Lisa took it quite poorly. She was actually unhappy, as if my betterment of myself was a judgment on her. She used to ask me if I didn't like her the way she was and make these snide remarks. I had never once advised her to make any changes to her appearance. I constantly informed her that even though she was gorgeous, something about my new routine bothered her. I had no idea how profound her fears were at the time. But they were much more than me. As you can see, Lisa had always compared herself to Katie, Diane, and Jen, 3 of our close friends. They were all well-read, self-assured, and in excellent form. It wasn't like they were trying to brag or anything, it was simply a natural aspect of who they were. Particularly Jen had gone through a difficult divorce a few years prior. Her spouse had been unfaithful to her, and she departed from him so quickly that his head spun. I had even provided Jen with emotional support and a loan to keep her business solvent after her divorce. And Lisa was enraged, to say the least. Even though Jen was as much of her friend as mine, she was furious that I had given her such encouragement. I had assisted her while Lisa was there, so it wasn't like I was spending time alone with her, but it didn't matter. And she concluded that having her own affair would be the best way to deal with her feelings. And that's when everything started to go wrong. Since Jen's divorce, Lisa's conduct has been a little strange, but not abnormally so. Even though I had always been more interested than she was, our closeness wasn't all that different, and our lives went on as usual. On the other hand, looking back, I can see that there were warning indications. However, how I learned of her affair. It was so cliché, it was almost humiliating, man. I was traveling 150 miles from home for business, and there was some snow and ice on the roadways. There was a significant traffic bottleneck on the freeway, as I could see from my traffic check. I informed Lisa over the phone that I would be arriving home later than expected, if not an hour or 2. Despite her seeming busy during the phone, she advised me to drive cautiously and slowly. I hung up, and then an unusual event occurred. I got a tip from a parking valet, of all people. He advised me to take a different path to escape the gridlock, which would spare me at least 60 minutes. I took his advice, and sure enough, I arrived home much sooner than I had anticipated. The famed odd automobile was in our driveway the moment I came onto our street. But this was no ordinary car, it belonged to Fred Parker, the head librarian at Lisa's volunteer library. Now, Fred was, well, not the most attractive person, to put it mildly. He was in his 40s, overweight, and, to be honest, sort of ugly. His car was there, and even though I'd never liked him and couldn't see why Lisa would be interested in him, I couldn't help but make the connection. After parking my automobile well away from view, I strolled towards our residence. Our house is rather ancient, and from the road it's difficult to see our lengthy, twisting driveway. I stole in via the back door, kicked off my shoes, and made my way up the back stairs in the quietest manner possible. I heard Lisa and Fred conversing in the guest bedroom at that point. "The king of training will be here in about an hour and a half, so I've got plenty of time to clean up," Lisa said, though I couldn't quite make out every word. Even though I had never referred to myself as the king of training, it didn't take a genius to realize that. Her tone made it obvious that she wasn't exactly impressed with my commitment to fitness. Something inside me gave way. I made up my mind right then and there to hold Fred accountable for his actions within my home. In a hurry, I dashed to the utility area by running down the rear steps and shut off the main power switches. With a flashlight in hand, I crept back up to the top of the main staircase. They were screaming, and even though it was completely dark inside the home, I could still hear them. Fred started to walk down the steps, and I heard him murmur something about being careful. I reached out, grabbed his shoe, and pulled it forward. I might have sent shivers down my spine with Fred's scream when he fell down those steep steps. He landed hard on the steps once and twice, and he had stopped talking altogether after the 3rd or 4th time. I left before witnessing the fallout. Rather, I made a hasty exit from the house via the same route, switched the electricity back on, and went to a nearby Starbucks to pass the time. Keeping up appearances, I bought 2 brownies, one for Lisa and myself, after spending about an hour at Starbucks acting like I had recently returned to the city. I then made my way home. Lisa had vanished by the time I got there, but there was one mark that she was unable to cover up, a little patch on the wall, and a dark crimson stain that extended halfway up the stairs. Blood was present. I couldn't resist grinning to myself. Fred had fallen, and I had no clue what state he was in, but based on the amount of blood, it didn't look good. I headed upstairs, being careful not to tread on any blood. He saw that Lisa had not even had time to change the guest bedroom's linens. When Fred had taken his small tumble, she must have been in a panic. I then wrapped the sheets that were covered in blood, placed them inside a plastic bag, and concealed them in the utility room. After that, I contacted Lisa on her cell phone and set the Starbucks bag, with the brownies on the kitchen table. After a few rings, she picked up, her voice trembling. "Furthermore, what the devil is up with these red patches on the stairs?" I asked, attempting to come across as firm but worried. After a lengthy silence, she eventually said, At Memorial Hospital I am. Fred Thompson, the one from the library, is that right? This is where I had to take him when he tumbled down the steps." Her voice carried the terror I could hear. She was aware of a serious problem. She was unaware, though, of how much I already knew. "Lisa, what on earth was Fred doing upstairs in our home?" I gave the phone a growl. She stumbled, obviously taken aback. She trailed off. "We were, talking about something." "Speaking about what?" "Lisa, what on earth will I discover when I walk upstairs?" "You have no business going upstairs. I'll be back home shortly," she blurted, attempting to maintain control of the situation. However, it was already too late. After hanging up, I quickly packed my things into a couple bags. I took the blood-stained bedding and the Starbucks bill and headed directly for a motel. No matter what excuses she attempted to make when she came home, I wasn't going to stay. I ended our conversation when she attempted to phone me later. "This evening I'm staying at a hotel. Tomorrow I have a meeting with a divorce attorney." I informed her in a detached manner, then hung up and switched off my phone. After then, there was no turning back. I had an appointment with a divorce attorney the next day, suggested by my buddy Jen. She was a time-efficient, strong, no-nonsense lady. We spoke over the specifics of my case, and I felt certain that I had a good case because of the evidence. I had the bloodstains, the affair, and everything else. After several days, the situation worsened much more. When the police arrived at my office, they wanted to talk to me about Fred's fall. Fred appeared to have survived the fall, although he had some serious cuts, fractures, and a concussion. He had reported to the police that he thought someone had grabbed his leg just before he collapsed, and that the home had inexplicably become black. I maintained my composure and said, "I thought Fred's fall was just an accident." At the time, I wasn't even at home. I stopped at Starbucks after getting trapped in traffic. "You can examine the traffic cameras, the receipts, or anything else you require." To support my alibi, I turned them my Starbucks receipt and valet ticket. Even though the police didn't investigate any further, I realized that my marriage was about to fail. Not too long after, I had a strong case for divorce, and Lisa had no chance of escaping this one. Things starting to come together. The divorce went more quickly than I had anticipated. Because of her tenacity and sharpness, my attorney was able to get a court order to obtain Lisa and Fred's DNA samples very swiftly. I had an airtight case once their DNA was discovered on the bloodstained bedding in the guest room. What had transpired could not be denied. People began contacting us as news got out among our friends and relatives, some expressing amazement and sadness. I followed along. Depending on who I was speaking to, I would pretend to be either sad or modest. However, I had a feeling more akin to relief within. There was no more lying now that the truth was out. Jen was one person who, oddly enough, shown some happiness. I was free from the betrayal and prepared to move on with my life, and she seemed to be the only one who truly understood how I was feeling. The divorce was finalized in no time at all. Lisa received the house and half of our joint assets. That didn't worry me too much because I never really loved the house. Now that the kids were mainly grown, it was too huge for the two of us and required frequent maintenance. She bought out my stake to maintain her comfort level, but still not quite as wealthy as I was. As you can see, I co-founded a business a few years ago that produced vertical axis wind turbines, which I created. The firm had performed extraordinarily well, and I had turned down a very attractive offer to sell it to a large international company just before learning of Lisa's affair. The best part of this agreement was that I didn't have to give Lisa any of the proceeds from the sale because of certain special conditions. An insurance had demanded years ago, when I was just getting the business off the ground, that Lisa give up all of her rights to it in the event that management changed. At the time, she was paid $200,000 for signing the contract, which she was more than pleased to accept, because she didn't think the company would be successful. She wasn't as happy when the firm sold for millions of dollars, to put it mildly. Everything else was split equally between us, but I kept the whole windfall from the company's sale. I had all I needed financially, and I could start again. However, not everyone was happy to hear of the divorce. Who, after finding out the whole tale, were at the time college students, were supportive, However, my daughter Emma, who had a strong bond with her mother, was incensed. She was baffled as to why I refused to make amends with Lisa. Emma countered that her mother had made a mistake and had just been dealing with poor self-esteem. She went so far as to say Lisa deserved a second chance and expressed sorry for everything. Emma would never understand what I was trying to tell her. Even if Lisa was experiencing insecurity, the betrayal was nonetheless unacceptable. Whatever the cause, there are certain lines you just can't get back from. I had to accept that Emma might not get it for a long time, if at all, and that reconciliation was never a possibility for me. After the divorce was official, I had to get my thoughts straight. I loaded up my Tesla and set off on a solitary journey across the United States, traveling westward. It was the ideal chance for me to take a break from everything and consider my future course of action. I was free to do as I pleased and didn't have to worry about money. It was just what I needed. That road trip. I drove through national parks for weeks at a time, pausing to walk and take in the beauty. After the turmoil of the past several months, I wasn't sure what I was searching for, perhaps just a little serenity. I eventually arrived in Arizona, close to the Grand Canyon, and made the decision to go on a guided trip with a guide called Rex down into the canyon. The mix of persons in the group included 2 college students, a married couple from England, 2 sisters, Monica and Liz, and Monica's adolescent daughter, Abby. I immediately clicked with Monica and Liz. They were similar in age to me, and during the trek we became close, joking and exchanging tales. But her husband's job prevented him from attending. But Liz and I had recently separated, so there was something we had in common. We hiked all day and then gathered around the campfire to sip bourbon. I even gave the group a couple of ghost stories that made them all nervous, especially Abby, who was listening intently to everything I said. During one of the stories, I pulled a small practical joke on her, grasping her shoulders and yelling. She screamed and fled, but it was all in good fun, and we all laughed afterwards. But things turned serious that evening. I heard Abby scream in the middle of the night, and I instantly woke up. I looked up to see that she had just come back from using the restroom when a mountain lion had pounced on her. Without giving it a second thought, I quickly grabbed a rock and raced over to give the cat a good enough fright. But fortunately nothing too severe. But she was shaken, and for the remainder of the journey she would not sleep anywhere but next to me. Particularly Liz, Monica and Liz were really appreciative. She began to flirt more and more over the course of the following several days. She exuded confidence, humor, and a hint of forwardness. I asked them all to dinner once we returned to town after our climb, but by the end of the evening it was obvious Liz had other plans. She made no attempt to conceal it. Liz moved in after Monica and Abby went to bed. She said it straight out, "I get to give it to you because I'm divorced, and you deserve a reward for saving Abby." It lacked nuance, but it didn't bother me. Things became fairly heated when we ended up in my hotel room that night. We slept very little. But I was grinning when we eventually passed out. When we,